Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. In today's video, we're going to be going over the average placements of top players throughout the entirety of 2023. Now, I did not get these numbers by themselves. They were made by TAIMA on Twitter. I highly recommend you go follow them out and then just check out this thread in general because it is incredibly cool. There's a modified version of that kind of balances out some of the losses and makes it a lot more like SPR. So some of your really low placements aren't going to be as punishing. We're just going to be sticking to the main ones today just because I do feel like those harder losses should be punishing a little bit more. But again, there is just so much information here, lots of ins and outs, answers a ton of questions. So if you guys are curious and there's something I don't touch in the video, I highly recommend you check it out, as well as this thread just being incredibly cool. But let's get right into it. So these are just results from 2023, and by no means do they correlate to a direct ranking because you can't really measure the wins that people got at these tournaments as well as the size of the tournament itself, because getting 9th place at, let's say, Battle of BC is a lot more impressive than getting 9th place at an A-tier tournament. So these are just results from 2023. It's not a direct ranking, though all the spots are, of course, indisputable because these are just the numbers, and our 50th player is going to be Sen. Now, this isn't surprising for me at all. I can honestly see him being a little bit higher because he is an incredible player. He did really well in Japan as well, and a lot of top NA talent, when they went to Japan, they took hits, and they took big hits because their placements were low. I think the biggest example of that would be Mutace. Mutace is going to be a lot lower on this list than you may expect because we all know he's an incredible player, but he has some very bad performances that are holding him down. You have Shiryuki, who's been doing well this year, JDV, who absolutely popped off at Battle of the BC, Dark Wizzy, even though I feel like Kurama's getting a lot of the fame recently from all that Mario success, Dark Wizzy has also been doing incredibly well. Jackal as well, that's another name that you're definitely going to see higher if he continues to play like he did at Crown. Seems like towards the later end of this season, he started to figure it out. He top 8's major upset into immediate second place at Crown. So I'm really excited to see how Jackal is going to continue improving because I know he's going to continue because that man is ridiculously talented. Now, as well, speaking of Mario, that's kind of Japan's top Mario representation. They have Snow as well, though, another really good Mario there that I forget to mention in a couple of my videos. So shouts to Snow, he's also incredible. But now it's been doing amazing things with Mario in Japan. Have multiple top 8s at some of their biggest tournaments. Rizzy Asu as well. I feel like Rizzy Asu is a name I don't get to talk about enough anymore, but this guy plays like 30 plus characters, and it feels like in the current meta of Ultimate, that's not that crazy. Playing that many characters at the top level, just because MK Leo is playing 3 characters, that should not be the bar. Playing like more than 2 characters in this game at the top level is very impressive. Rizzy Asu's out here with 5 or 6, and he's changing it daily. Like, it is actually insane how versatile this guy is. Next up, you're going to have Kome, and Kome, I feel like, is definitely that title of best Shulk in the world right now, but it wasn't as free as it used to be. There's a lot of Shulk players that kind of stepped up recently. You have Nico doing well, Jared as King doing the best he's ever done, Ramses is always good. I'm sure there's a couple other ones that I'm skipping off the top of my head, but Kome seems to be the most consistent out of all of them, or at least the most consistent at hitting some of those really high peaks. It's really hard for Shulk to get there, because while the character is still really good, there's a lot of just micro adjustments that you need to be doing all the time with your Monado arts and your Monado storage, so it can make him a little bit difficult at the top level, where you could just pick someone like Cloud who has that same archetype of, yes, I have a massive sword, but also I don't need to worry about switching out my arts, and also I have my back air. Next up, you're going to have Apollo Kage. Now, this is the first player where it's like, noticeably, they are way too low. There's a couple people that are too low. You know, I would move up now. I would maybe move up Sen a little bit. Jackal, I'd maybe move up. Apollo Kage is a top 20 player in the world right now, but he has a couple really low placements that are going to be dragging him down. He doesn't do great at Battle of BC. He doesn't do great at Genesis. So when you're averaging out, even though he has a lot of good placements, most of them being around that 9th to 13th area, when you have some of those super low ones and you're not having a first place, you're not having a second. Remember, Apollo Kage's peak this season is going to be a top 8 at Summit, which is still very good, but when it's just numbers like this list, it's really hard to gauge, okay, yes, he's getting some really consistent results, but these bad ones are going to be hurting a lot more because he just doesn't have as many appearances in the top 8. And also, Apollo Kage has been farming regionals. Like, he does so well at regionals, he gets a bunch of good wins there and wins a lot of them, which would help boost his placement up as well. But again, this is just major tournaments. Then you have Goblin up next. Goblin is one of the most consistent players in this game, but it feels like they aren't reaching that peak that they somewhat used to be towards, like, at least like the end of the quarantine era, or rather the start of the quarantine era. Goblin was farming. They were getting insane results back to back to back. They aren't hitting those peaks anymore, but they're still being incredibly consistent, still doing well at the regional level. Base Mage as well. I feel like Base Mage has stepped on the gas recently. His last 3 performances have been really good. Getting an average of 21.4 with Jigglypuff is insanity. Like, if you look at the characters around him, you have a Shulk here, you have a Snake here, you have a Roy here, then you have a Jigglypuff. That is a pretty ridiculous placement. Next up, we're going to have who's, in my opinion, definitely the best Sheik player in the world. There's a lot of very good Sheiks that could take that title. Mr. R is still really good. When Void starts playing super seriously, he's obviously a threat. I think Rox is incredibly underrated, but we just unfortunately don't get to see a ton of him. But is so incredibly inconsistent. He's one of the only players to actually make top 8 at a major this year with Sheik. I believe he's the only player to make top 8 at a major this year with Sheik, so huge shouts to him for that. You have Takara as well. I feel like the shows have been on a bit of a rise recently. I think FGC characters in general are really strong in this game, and Takara is one of the best reps of those characters. Next up, we have Gak, who is definitely the best S in the world at this point, especially after his performance at Meisuma. Oh my lord. He went off that tournament so hard, played out of his mind. One of the best S runs that we have ever seen. I'm hoping to see him replicate that because team content, we got to get some dubs in there at some point. Cola as well. Cola's season has been a little bit more quiet, but he still has some amazing placements. I mean, the 20.2 average is still very good. DeBuzz as well. I think DeBuzz right now in the current last month ranking is way higher than this. Overall for the season, he's also still probably higher than this because he has a lot of good wins in his tournaments, but he does have some lower placements. His only big top 8 is going to be at Kaguribi, which is such a big top 8 to get. But when it's your only one, it's going to make your average a little bit lower. Kind of the same thing for Siski as well. We haven't seen him perform a ton at major tournaments. His highest placement is going to be his run at Battle of BC with a really strong 9th place there. He absolutely popped off that tournament. Next up, we're going to have D-Dog, who popped off super hard at Collision. Getting a light win there was obviously massive. He doesn't have a top 8 yet this season, but I definitely think that he can get it if he keeps grinding. Really impressive player. I would argue that he's probably the best Steve right now in the US because you have obviously Onan on his leave of absence. Hopefully he enjoys that because he definitely deserved that break. You have DD as well, who's also in contention for super strong, but unfortunately DD just doesn't have a ton of results for himself, but he did do really well at MobileCon, which is kind of the only big event that we have seen him at. Also, I should mention, because I think I just forgot to, you need to have at least 3 tournaments under your belt to be in contention for this list. So you're not going to see players like Proto Bonham, like DD, like Quid, even though they are extremely talented, they just don't meet the criteria. Next up, you're going to have Noi. Now, I was actually initially pretty shocked to see Noi on this part of the list because he doesn't have any major top 8s this season, but his results are extremely consistent. His performances are 33rd at Meisuma top 12 and 25th at Kaguribi 9, but he's a 17th at Umabora 9, 13th at Subageki 13. He also has a 9th place at Delta 4, 17th at Kaguribi 10. His results across the board are just extremely consistent, and honestly, I'm super happy with that. I don't know if he's playing more PT or more Allmar nowadays, but honestly, a mix of both characters I think is fine because they seem to both be a die breed, except in Japan. Allmar is super relevant in Japan, and then everywhere else in the world feels like that character has kind of fallen off, though you do have reps everywhere else. It just feels like Shuton the Buzz being your main pillars. Myron as well, you aren't seeing them use the character as much, and PT, that character is pretty much dead in the water, which makes me really sad because PT is broken, so hopefully Noi will be the one that able to take them back into the meta. Umeki is next with a 17.9 jump. Umeki's had a couple top 8s this year. He's definitely the best Daisy player in the world, and I think there's a serious argument for him between Umeki and Mudace. They have very different playstyles, but Umeki does not have nearly the lows that Mudace does. Now, on the other hand, Mudace's highs are much higher than Umeki, so it really does come down to what you value, but as you can see from the 17.9 average, he's usually placing pretty well. Next up, you're going to have Yara, who I have as the best Samus player in the world right now. Now, Siski hasn't had a super long season, and he does have that performance at Battle of BC, which is pretty insane, and Yara does underperform him at that tournament, but also Yara has more reps under his belt. He has higher highs, getting some top 8s at major performances, and has been overall, I think, just performing better this season. Now, of course, maybe we'll see Siski in the latter half of the year. He'll scrap his Samus title right back. Maybe Quick will see it. Maybe Tora will steal it. There's a couple people that could honestly take it, but Yara right now just looks like he has this character down to a science. He's been doing incredibly well, and I expect that to continue. Neo as well for the next player. Neo is insane, and he kind of just became a threat this season. Neo just came very, very good out of nowhere. He already has his first major top 8, which is a huge boundary to get over. I feel like a lot of top players, when they're on their rise to the top, they kind of get stuck in this area where they're getting 9th, or getting 13th, or getting 17th. They can't quite break into that top 8, and once they do break into that top 8, we see them go absolutely crazy. Neo has already broken that one boundary, and I think we're going to see that crazy part anytime now. We're already kind of seeing it. He's won some very big regional events, got top 8 at Meisuma with top 12, and I'm really excited to see how he continues his career. Then you have Ouch, Jogabu, and Aaron, all tied for 17th. Now, Jogabu is the only one of them who's been able to make a top 8 this season. You have Aaron with a 25th at Umabora, and then 13th at both Summit. I mean, I know it's the lowest you get at Summit, but it's still 13th at Summit, and 13th at Major Upset. You have Ouch as well with multiple 9th places. Most notably, he has a 9th place at Genesis, which is obviously huge because it's Genesis. And then for Jogabu, he has a couple top 8s here and there, a couple lower performances as well. But for a 17.0 average, you gotta have some insane peaks, and all of these guys have it. Now on to the top 25, starting off with Jigaimo and Chase, who are right next to each other with the 16.3 and 16.2. Chase, officially the best Palutena player in the world because, I mean, look at it right there, the list says so. Now, both these players do have multiple top 8. They also do both have some lower performances, but a 16.2/3 average is really good to have, and that's kind of where Palutena you'd expect to be placed. We've had this talk about Palutena a lot. That's the character that's going to be getting you some really consistent placements, but not always getting you the peak placements, and it's literally perfectly demonstrated right here. But also Chase and Jigaimo are still getting some of those peak placements, so if you're playing Palutena in the current meta and you think, oh, I can't top 8 these big events, I'm not good enough, my character won't allow me, no, you definitely still can. Palutena is still broken. Meister at a 16.0, it's a little bit low for him, but he does start off the season a little bit weaker, and then just has been farming as of late. Battle of the BC, amazing. Collision, amazing. He's been looking very strong. I'm honestly thinking he could take that title of best game watch back from Mia. Now, that's going to be really hard, and obviously it's going to be more up to Mia than it is Meister because Mia's improvement rate has been so fast that he's got to slow down like exponentially for Meister to catch up because, again, Mia is crazy. Odin with only 3 events, but one of them is a 4th place at Crown, which is obviously going to help him out a ton. And then, unfortunately, I think he is taking a little bit of a break right now, so a 15.3 out for him, that's really strong. I hope he enjoys his break. Then you have Cosmos 14.5. Cosmos has went from this player that was a very inconsistent to some really good highs to a player that doesn't quite have those highs anymore, but now just feels like everything from him is consistent. Though he does still have a couple top 8 at base performances this year, which is very good. Above him, you have Hiro and Big D both at a 14.3 with Bowser and Ice Climber, 2 extremely volatile characters. Like, having these numbers with characters that can be countered so hard and get so owned sometimes with some awful matchups is insanely impressive. Now, there aren't really any more surprises on this list. Everyone that is up here is supposed to be up here because that's just kind of how the consistency thing averages out. One tournament isn't going to carry all your points across. You need to be good from placement to placement to placement, and the players above have done that over and over again, starting off with Zachary, who ironically does have some of the lower placements up here, but also has 2 third places at Kaguribis, with Pit, which is insane. Then you have Kameme with an 11.0. He just did amazing at Battle of BC. He has had multiple other runs where he's popped off super hard. The only sword player that's doing it to this effect, and while other sword players do exist, of course, that character is really good, no one is even close to Kamehameha's level. And I'm honestly curious to see if anyone will be able to catch up. My answer would be leaning towards yes, because I still do think that Sora is very good, but Kamehameha's consistency right now is unreal with this character. Next up, you have Zomba. If Zomba didn't have like the first half of his season, this would be so much higher because he starts off his season fairly weak, then he goes to Japan, gets 9th at Kaguribi, comes back, and is also at the sudden he's God. He's God all of a sudden. He gets a 7th place at Battle of BC. He wins Crown, has just been doing insanely well. Like, these are Rob numbers right here. This is what Rob should be getting. Feels like for a long time everyone's like, yes, Rob is broken, Rob is tasked, blah, 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 blah. But Rob wasn't getting those results. Zomba is finally getting those results again, and he has been looking insanely good. Like, in contention for best in NA good. It's actually unreal, or rather America good. Then you have T up next. T as well, his season has been a little bit shaky. As you can see, a 10.5 average. That is a little bit low for T. He's someone that's usually facing within that top 8, so a little bit low for him. But then again, when a 10.5 average is low for you, it kind of just shows how impressive you are as a player. Next up, you're going to have Kurama, and Kurama's season starts off a little bit weak, underperforms at Genesis, at Collision, but then he top 8 Summit, he top 8's Major Upset, he top 8's Crown, and he's definitely someone that you could throw into the conversation for best player in America. Now, that is a really tough conversation right now because your top 4 is some order of Tweak, Light, him, and then Zomba, and I'm not sure who that number 5 would be. There's honestly a ton of people that you could slot into there, but being in that top 4 alone is already insanely impressive. Next up, you're going to have Ken. Now, y'all already know that I really like Ken's character combination because it is Sonic and Sephiroth, and honestly, any character paired with Sonic is going to be a good character combination. I think Ken is using it in a lot better than he was last year. I feel like last year it was a lot more Sephiroth than it needed to be. Now he's using the Sonic a lot more, and he's bringing out the Sephiroth in moments where it's going to shine, and we've been seeing him have a ton of success with it. Riddles as well. Riddles has been experimenting a lot more with Terry as late. He kind of dropped it, feels like, towards the end of 2022, and he's done well without the Terry. He's done well with the Terry. He wins Collision this year. He underperforms at Genesis and Battle of BC, which is a little bit unfortunate, but everything else has been pretty good for him. Like, his Japan trip, he just got W after W after W. His worst placement in Japan is a 7th place at Kaguribi, which is just ridiculous. Like, Riddles has been doing incredible this season, and I would still say he's definitely the best Canadian player in the world. Even though Big D and Ouch have been making waves as of late, Riddles has just cemented himself to be so amazing at this game, and someone that is definitely going to be top 10. Now we have the top 12 players in the world. At number 12, you're going to have Mia. Now, the only reason that Mia is this low is because he has a 49th That is a really bad placement. He also has a 13th, which is not as bad of a placement, but that 49th is going to be hurting Mia a ton because everything else from him has been pretty much like top 2 finishes. He's been looking insanely solid. The latter half of the year has been ridiculous, like a top 5 player in it for sure, maybe even top 3. He's been looking so good. So Mia's a little bit low on this list, but it does make a lot of sense. Osimo as well. Osimo, perfect sense. This guy does not do bad. His worst performances are like 13th places. He top 8s a lot of stuff. He's had multiple top 4s. He's a 2nd place at Kaguribi 9 and is overall an incredibly underrated player. Like, I would probably say the most underrated player in the world, excluding like regional underrations, like a player like Bloom Forever, because people just aren't aware of how good Bloom is. And I guess Osimo can technically fall into that because Japan and NA people don't really know about Japan, but Osimo is an insane player, and I think this placement for him is super valid, and he honestly might get it on the rankings if he keeps performing the way he does. Our first player in the top 10 is going to be Shuton with a 7.2 average. Also, it's kind of funny that Osmo has an 8.1 average, and he barely misses that spot for top 10. So everyone in the top 10, on average, is getting top 8 at their tournaments, which is pretty insane. And the 7.2 for Shuton is honestly a little bit low for me because he has a couple duds this season that he literally just didn't have in 2022. But he also has the peaks that he was having. He's a 3rd at Crown, 3rd at Battle BC, has won multiple majors, has been looking insanely good still, especially towards the latter half of the season. But towards the start, there's a couple shaky tournaments in there that are going to be making his average a little bit lower. Light, it's kind of the opposite. It feels like everyone kind of started off the season a little bit weak and then turned it up towards the end. Light's results towards the end have had a little bit of a drop, but like a very, very little bit because he has a 9th at Crown, 13th at Battle BC, 9th at Collision. Everything else from him is a top 8. He has a top 3 at Genesis, so he's been looking insane overall this season. Glutini and Yoshidora as well, both of them with a 6.5. Now, they both don't have a ton of majors, but also they both don't have a lot of bad placements. Like Glutini, for example, his worst performance is a 9th place at Battle BC. Everything else has been top 8s. Yoshidora's performances are pretty similar as well. He also has a top 3 at Umebora to start off the year, which is really strong. A couple other top 8s here or there. He top 8s Battle BC, like 6.5 for both these players is ridiculous, and they're also the only ones at their craft that are doing it this well. Like, other Yoshi players do exist, other Wario players do exist. Wario is definitely more common than Yoshi, but no one is getting the results that these guys are. Like, it's not even close. And for our top 5, our first player is going to be Leo with a 6.1 average. Now, for MK Leo, this is really low. For anyone else in the world, this is amazing. Leo's missed only a couple top 8s this season, and when he does miss the top 8, it means he's going to get like a 9th place. His worst placement this season is going to be a 13th place at Battle of BC, which is pretty crazy. He obviously won Genesis. He has multiple top 8s, has still been doing very well, and he's done all of this while going through a character crisis, by the way. Like, he's been playing Aegis sometimes he's playing Violet Joker, sometimes he's playing just Aegis. Like, there's so many character combinations that he's gone through. Some have worked, some have not, and it's going to give him this 6.1 average. So in your experimental phase to still be top 5 in the world for average placements, that is very good. Sonic's as well is literally peak consistency in this game. The only bad placement he has recently is his 13th place at Crown, because everything else from Sonic's has been literally perfect. Like, he has just been looking so good, and he's getting into these top 8s and performing. He has a 3rd at Level Up Expo. He has a 4th place at Genesis, 3rd place at Let's Make Big Moves. Like, he's not getting into the top 8 and then leaving. He is making his mark once he gets in there. Next up, you're going to have Tweak in 3rd place, and honestly, this is where I would put Tweak on a normal ranking as well, and I feel like a lot of people would agree with me because he is just insanely consistent. A 4.7. That is 0.9 higher than the next player, which is Sonics. He also has a major win this year, winning Let's Make Big Moves. The only top 8 that he has missed was his 9th place at Battle of BC. He has a couple 2nd places like at Summit and Level of Expo, and overall has just been looking ridiculously good this season. He's also going to the next season looking to add a new character to his roster in Mega Man, maybe putting Sephiroth a little bit more to the wayside, so I'm curious to see how that's going to affect his performance. But your top 2 is Spargo and Aquila. Now, I think Spargo is the best player in the world right now, but looking at these numbers, 4.4 for Spargo, which is insanity, by the way. He's being held back by his 13th place at Summit and his 9th place at Crown. Aquila has a 2.3 average, which is being held back by his 7th place at Genesis and 3rd place at Maizuma top 11. Because every other tournament that he's been to, he has been in the grand finals of. Aquila is he's undeniable. That's all I can really say about that. He is so insanely consistent. He has such a strong grip on every single region in the game, and is overall just insane. And I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Again, check out TAIMA on Twitter because there's a bunch of stuff that I didn't even mention in the video that they also put in a ton of details in this thread as here. There's also like an SPR difference list. So as you can see, players like Mudace and Mia are much higher on here because their super low lows aren't affecting them as harshly. And there's just so much detail that I didn't go over. So yeah, please check that out. Sports with Absolute Unreal. I thank you guys for everything, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.